One, two. Good evening and welcome to Overtime here on WOTM. I am Gerhard Mathangani, back with you for another week of programming. In with our good friend Mark Everett Kelly, our researcher and expert extraordinaire. We'll talk about a lot of things today. Of course, Jacksonville State winning the OVC Championship as well as Alabama spring football. We'll also talk a little bit about the Masters Championship that was won yesterday by Hideki Matsui. Also talk Atlanta Braves and a big retirement in the world of the NFL. But Mark, let's first start off with Jacksonville State. You know, they went into Murray, Kentucky yesterday with a must-win game situation. Both teams are 5-1 in the league. Basically, the winner was going to get the automatic qualifier. The loser was going to have to cross their fingers and hope that the selection committee puts them into the championship bracket coming up next week. Jacksonville State ended up getting it done. 28-14. They got the win. They had the OVC championship. What do you make of the JSU big win on the road last night?
Well, they had dominated the series overall. They were 15-2 overall. There was, I believe, they won their 7th straight against them.
Right.
So, and then this was just what they had set out to do at the beginning of the season. They were the best team in the conference. Everybody knew it, and now they went out to prove it. And I believe they have one of the best players in the conference. Zion Webb has played absolutely fantastic, especially the last 2 weeks. And he kind of led them on offense. In the first half, they had a couple of long drives. They dominated the offensive line, and I think they set the tone early. And they can do that to teams because they have speed and they have the ability to pound the football rushing it.
Exactly.
They outran them 205-26 last night. Not only do they have the ability to do that, but then on defense, they have the ability to stop the run.
Right.
So they can run and stop the run, which is, if you can do those two things really successful, you're going to win most of your games. And especially in this conference where I think their team speed is another big part that they've improved on a lot that you really got to see this spring.
Exactly. And after that loss to Austin Peay, it seemed like it was kind of gut check time. It was a gut check time for this program looking to kind of take that next step. And Austin Peay also beat Murray State as well, kind of an upset there in that same right as they did against Jacksonville State. As they go into the playoffs now, on this 2-game winning streak, they scored 44 in a big road game a couple of weeks ago. They scored 28. You mentioned the great defense. Do you think they're playing as bad as well as they can going into a playoff run? They had those 4 games in the non-conference. They've had these games now in the OVC. Where do you kind of assess this team as you kind of take a look at the big picture as they chase the national championship?
I think there was a little bit of concern after they lost to Austin Peay because of the way they lost with the turnovers and the penalties. And when you lose playing that sloppy, you figure as a head coach, well, geez, we can do anything.
Right.
But I think they've really set the tone the last 2 weeks. They've stayed away from turnovers. They've stayed away from penalties, and there were a lot of dumb penalties. As a coach, that's the worst, dumb penalties. But you expected them to do this. At least the teams that are in the conference, this is their 8th OVC championship. They're leaving conference after this year. This was, I believe, the ninth opponent they've held over 100 yards.
Right.
Something like they broke their record between 2016 and 2017. They lead the nation overall, allowing just under 81 rushing yards per game defensively.
Right.
So they were able to do what they do well on both defense and offense. And then Zion Webb the last 2 games really was the difference maker, is connecting with a couple of his wide receivers and doing what you expect them to do when the season began. And I think most people, when the season began, they saw them play. Look, if you saw them play in the fall and the way they played against Florida State, not that Florida State is what they used to be,
right.
But when you're playing a ACC team and you can go out there and compete with them, you can see that their talent level isn't that far off from a Division I team.
Exactly. You mentioned something that I want to touch on now. It is their final game in the OVC. This is the final OVC opponent. How big was this for the university to kind of end off the football side of things with another conference championship and do it on the road against the team that had basically the same record as they did, they being Jacksonville State and Murray State with the same record. How gratifying must this be for the Gamecocks to be able to leave the OVC with another championship and kind of leave it on a good note?
Yeah, I don't think they wanted to leave not being champions.
That's right.
Because then what do you leave in a conference for? You leave, generally, if you're going to leave a conference, it's because you're too good for the conference. You're getting better. You're growing out of the conference. There's better opportunities for you in another conference.
Right.
And with the Atlantic Sun now starting in a couple years and kind of being swallowed up by the MAC. At least the MAC is a pretty well-known conference.
That's
in
right.
basketball, it's well-known. I know that you had your 6 or 7 major conferences, and then like the Atlantic 10, the WAC, and the Mountain West Conference. Those are all kind of like the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty good conference to be in. And like you said, it helps them with what they're trying to do as far as get teams more regionally and then develop better rivalries.
Right.
And because around here, Jack State is the best team.
Exactly.
And now they really get to showcase that against other teams in the area, and it'll set up nice to them. You're going into whenever the ASUN starts in a couple of years. And this is what the program leads to. And eventually maybe it'll lead to Division I, eventually to bigger and better things. But you could see where they were even like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have dominated this level.
Right.
They really have. They've only won 1 championship. They've won 22 conference championships. You don't have to win an overall national championship every year, but pretty much every year they're in, they're in the discussion,
Right.
especially in this area. And then in the OVC, you knew that they were the best team. With their 8th conference championship. And like you said, it's time to move on and find out what else they can do. And I think it's great for the university to be a big money maker, and it'll also get them out more in the community.
Exactly. I think that the move to the ASUN will be a really good one for Jacksonville State. Meanwhile, their final game in the OVC was met with a lot of celebration. Some Jacksonville State players and head coach John Gross talked to the media after yesterday's big win.
And just to get back out here and get a chance to actually compete for the OVC, you know what I'm saying, not being a 3-way tie or anything like that, just have a chance, feel great.
This is my 3rd one since I've been here. We worked hard for this. We had a long season, short season in the fall, and playing in the spring. It's just been a great time, and we're excited to come out here and do what we've done.
The defense and the offense, we work together. We complement each other well. If they're having a down game, then we got to pick it up. We got to have a good game. Or if we're having a down game, the offense got to play well. We pride ourselves on defense and pride ourselves on stopping the run, and I think that we did that today.
They're all special, and I think we've had special groups that come through here that's made these things happen, but this is more special than any of them. I think just navigating through all what you're talking about. So take a young team that's very immature starting out with and have to go navigate through all this stuff, and had some injuries, different things, but to put the product on the field we put on the field every weekend, I think it's been a real accomplishment, an achievement for them guys. And to go out with OVC championship, what better way to leave the OVC than to go out with a championship. So I'm excited about this team and kind of appreciate everything they've done to get us to this point.
Let's go to some of your breakdowns here, Mark. Some of the things about Jacksonville State going into these playoffs. I think it is worth noting that JSU, I think a lot of fans have maybe classified it as maybe quote unquote disappointing playoff runs. However, they have had the big national championship run back in 2015 when they played Carson Wentz and North Dakota State back in that championship game. They also won that semifinal game. I think for JSU this year, it's can you get out of that first round, obviously number one, and then can you make it to the second round, and then everything else after that I think is kind of gravy on top. Where do you assess JSU as you kind of look at their history vis-a-vis where they are right now?
Well, I mean, you look at since 2013, they made the playoffs 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. And
Right.
then 2019 they missed, and now it seems longer than it was because of COVID.
Right.
So, but basically they've made the playoffs in all of the last 8 seasons except for one. And they haven't had maybe as much success as you would want them to have. But again, as we've discussed in the NCAA tournament, and sometimes it's hit or miss. You got to be lucky.
Right.
And they're going against some really good teams. I mean, North Dakota State, those are really dominant football teams, and they're known, they're expected to win the national championship, not
Right.
just win their conference.
Right.
So they're going up against a little bit of a different, mindset when you're considering that if Jack State doesn't win their conference, that's a disappointment to them. If North Dakota State don't win a national championship,
Right.
that's a disappointment to them. So maybe they weren't as good enough to beat them as you saw they were in 2015. But this is, again, now that they're leaving and going into a different conference, this gives them a chance to kind of set a new tone. And if they can get out of the first round, different playoff format this year, only 16 teams as opposed to 28 teams. So you don't have to play as many rounds. It's kind of like a sprint to the finish, and I think they're set up to do that really well.
Exactly, and given those 4 games they played in the non-conference part of the season as well.
Yep.
You also broke down Zion Webb. I think that you make a good point here on JSU's quarterback doing a really good job over the last couple of games and doing it both ways with his arms and with his legs.
Yeah, I mean, you feel look, all of the NFL is about guys who can do multiple things, and it's not just running and passing. You have to be able to avoid the rush. You have to be able to complete passes on third down. This guy's a leader for the offense that he runs. That when he plays well, they play well. When he turned the ball over and when they were committing penalties, they had a little bit of a confidence shaken. But he came out really the last 2 weeks and said, look, I'm going to take this on my back. 6 total touchdowns, over 500 total yards, almost 600 total yards. I think, what can you expect more from your team leader? I mean, this is your quarterback, and he can pass, over 480 passing yards and over 128 rushing yards, over 60 per game. And he's able to do multiple things really well, and that keeps the defense off balance. That's why they had the best offense and the best defense in the OVC, and they were able to, if you can push your will on some of these teams by running the ball, and they absolutely can, it starts with having good quarterback play, good offensive line play, and knowing who the leader is in that huddle.
Exactly, and he's been that, and he had to be a backup for a little while to Zerrick Cooper. Now he's got the starting job, and he's led them back to the FCS playoffs. Meanwhile, the Stats FCS Top 25 polls out. Jacksonville State actually comes in number 9 in this week's poll. So you'll see the top 7 right here, where JSU actually ranks number 9 in the poll. So I think it sets up from a poll perspective, it sets up really well for the JSU to chase a national championship.
Yeah, but we had talked about, look, James Madison, number 1.
That's
okay,
right, yeah.
The Colonial Athletic Association, the ADs are going to vote on who wins that conference. Who do you think they're going to pick? They play,
one team in the country.
exactly. They play Richmond this weekend. If they win that game, obviously, you have to play at least 3 conference games to qualify for the playoff or for an at-large bid, which they'll probably get anyway if they say lose that game. You're not going to be number 1 in the nation and then not get in. So I don't like that. I've never heard of that before, where the ADs get together and vote on a conference champion. It's stupid.
Yeah, and the Big Ten kind of did that on the FBS level, where they just rearranged the rules.
For Ohio State,
we can play 5 games.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of that here in the fall as we kind of get rid of the COVID exclusions as it relates to college football. So that's the setup right now as we go into the FCS playoffs. Keep in mind that the selection show comes up next Sunday. We have 1 more week of regular season games. Selection show's next Sunday. We do know Jacksonville State will play at home. We'll find out who they play coming up next weekend. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we will talk Masters. A new champion has been crowned, and we will revisit that and talk about the history made at Augusta coming up next.
Be careful. And when you opened it, you called him a Decky Matsui.